I think there's real risks and challenges in the built environment moving forward that possibly industry is not prepared for. Rapid changes can create shockwaves that will be very difficult to manage unless you have future-fit professionals who understand the challenges and know what to do. The IDB eCourse was designed to bring diverse built environment professionals together so that they could learn how to work better together. When the course was originally conceptualized, I think the industry felt working better together did things like make our projects more efficient and less resource wasteful, and that was very important. While those are still incredibly important, they are much more pressingly important in the face of global challenges, global warming, climate change, the Sustainable Development Goals, etc. So why our projects have to be more sustainable is they use an incredible amount of resources. Our built environment contributes to a massive amount of global carbon emissions. The materials that we're taking from the planet are, many of them, not replenishable. We have to change how we're working. We can't continue business as usual. We can't just keep building the way we have been. That's why the course is still relevant and needed today. The opportunity of lifelong learning is really important for built environment practices to get on board with, because we live in a rapidly changing time with technologies and innovation and changing standards and changing issues that we need to respond to as professionals. Built environment professionals have been through a lot of education to get their licenses or their chartership, and they may feel, oh, I'm done with education. But if you're going to be in a profession for 40 years, 50 years, it's going to change. And the best way for you to stay on top of it and to be a leader in that profession and to be an agent for change and positive change is to stay educated. And so I think opportunities for lifelong learning, opportunities for teaching not just graduates, but mature staff and middle management staff are massively important and overlooked by many businesses.
For me, it's an incredibly nice thing to have green around me. I'm a kind of a country boy, so that's perhaps where I take it from, but it can be quite depressing, everything just being sort of flat, concrete surfaces, everything is very well defined, whereas living architecture is somehow undefined in its final shape. You don't know what will happen. Living root bridges are a centuries-old vernacular architectural technique to cross monsoon rivers, mainly in northeast India, in the Khasi and Jaintia hills. Isolated villages grow these bridges from the Indian rubber fig, Ficus elastica, and so they take these roots and they wind them over a bamboo structure, and then over decades and eventually centuries, you get these bridges forming, kind of crossing all of the otherwise impassable rivers and canyons. You take one look at these bridges and it's clear that no one planned the end shape of this bridge. I am doing structural investigations about these living root bridges. I'm looking at their geometry, I'm looking at their structural typologies, their forms, to see if there are things we can learn about modern engineering. And I think we can really learn something about relationships with our buildings by having buildings that require maintenance from users. In modern contemporary architecture, we have set shapes and set dimensions as our building blocks, whereas the kind of fundamental unit of design in living architecture is the growth process, or the kind of social processes around the bridge that allow it to be put into use. And I think that's a fascinating, beautiful thing.
I think for a lot of people, the built environment is just the wallpaper to their lives. It's just there. They don't really think about how it came to bear and who was involved in those processes. So I think involving children and young people in that consultation process is just absolutely crucial. They're one of the end users and they can have really insightful input into making that space function well in the future. Innovation Place is a network of practitioners that are working with children and young people across the country on place-based learning and participation projects. Things like summer schools, built environment expeditions, site visits, design challenges, and they're kind of holistic experiences that are designed to get children and young people to have an experience of the different interdisciplinary elements of the built environment sector, to voice their opinions and to perhaps challenge decisions so that the outcomes of the way places are designed are influenced and hopefully in the end work more successfully. It's all about nurturing and developing the next generation of placemakers and making sure that that next generation are diverse and representative of contemporary society. I think it's pretty fair to say that currently the majority of people that are involved in influencing and shaping our towns and cities are still predominantly affluent white men. And when you're talking about designing places and spaces that are going to be for the use of everyone in society, it's really important that the workforce that's responsible for designing those places is representative of society so that they can bring their insight and their empathy and their life experience, and that the spaces created are places where everyone wants to live, work and play and really be able to thrive.
Everybody wants to be comfortable, but people may not know what is comfort, because it's quite subjective. If we want occupants in buildings to feel comfortable, we have to understand them as individuals. In office buildings with a central heating, ventilation, air conditioning systems, it supplies the same temperature to the whole building, but people have different requirements on thermal conditions. Some people may feel warmer, some people may feel cooler. A central HVAC system cannot satisfy every individual in the building. Built environment is quite engineering subject, but if we think the built environment is designed for our occupants in buildings, so everything related to humans that we have to understand from a social and psychology way. This is what we are thinking to combine the engineering work with social science. The psychological intervention we are looking at is a combination of energy feedback and social norms. The energy feedback then gives you the understanding that how much energy you consumed, and the social norms give you the idea that how much energy your colleagues consumed. And this comparison between you and your colleagues give you the idea that whether you should save energy or not. Based on the results of our first experiment, we found that thermal comfort, thermal satisfaction, and thermal sensation were improved by our psychological intervention. This might indicate that our psychological intervention have ability to motivate people, and maybe it also have ability to achieve energy saving and sustainability in the future.
Cities are obviously the most complex systems we have, and the ones which we as human beings are controlling and can control. We need to take this opportunity very seriously. Very early on in my practice, I understood that politics matters. So it's all good to be an engineer, to be trained in the technicalities of decision making, the rational side of things, but I think equally be open about broader social, environmental, economic consequences our sort of engineering world can contribute to. We are of course struggling with enormous inequalities in cities across the world between the richest and the poorest. That needs to be dramatically reduced, these inequalities. Most of those questions are in the hands of national policymakers, but cities can ensure that there are public goods provided equally to rich and poor, that the school and educational systems are accessible across the board, that public transport provides the same level of mobility. But we are also talking about something which is fundamentally difficult to achieve with human beings, to make them really cooperate in such a way where precise boundaries in the virtual sand of this is my area of control and this is yours. We are moving beyond just talking the talk of flat hierarchies and everyone needs to cooperate and collaborate with everyone, because we realize that indeed has also its limitations. Some degree of vertical hierarchical control is needed for coherent processes, but mixing it up where people are able to communicate across the silos, across the disciplines and across the sectors is absolutely central.
One of the kids at school was angry at the teacher, and in front of everybody in the quad, he came up to the school with a gun and put the gun to the teacher's head because the teacher made him feel small. It's just the way we went to school. People ask you, what do you do as a planner? So you're planning new towns. The biggest thing we're doing as spatial planning is actually trying to reverse what the apartheid spatial planning has done. Trying to find ways to reconstruct towns, finding ways to make communities who were previously segregated to start integrating. I just needed to make a difference. I needed to be part of a solution. I was exposed to abuse within the family and then later abuse in my own life. I believe that it gives me some kind of drive in that I've been exposed to this for a bigger purpose. I feel it goes back to the most vulnerable people in the communities, and that is women and children, and I always think about that. How can my work improve the lives of women and children? And for simple examples of accessing a toilet facility in an informal settlement, it drives me insane that in 2019 that this is the case. Women are dumped in those spaces, women are raped, and children, you can see every day coming into town, there are children aged 5 or 6 years old holding another child by their hand. No parents in sight, but leaving the townships to come to town in order to get access to a better education. And that's absolutely wrong. It just drives me insane. It's an outcome of the legacy of apartheid planning. Quality living environment involves schools, it involves safety, access to public transport, access to economic opportunities, social opportunities. It's essential that we have an interdisciplinary approach to planning in South Africa, in Cape Town. In order to create those great living environments, all of us have to be around the table. For me now, planning is my space in which I can make that change.
Cambridge has a huge traffic problem. Commuting is creating congestion and air quality problems in the city. People spend 23 hours a year in their cars in traffic.
I would say the smart city is all about improving the quality of life for all citizens. Technology essentially is the means to do that. I'm a sort of nerdy modeler person. I do lots of number crunching.
Urban modeling is not a new thing. It's been going on for 50 plus years. What is new is digitalization provides a new opportunity to change the way traditional modeling in the urban context works.
Digital technology can be a tool to translate the data into a shared common language that is available to all disciplines. I believe that for city planning particularly, we currently do not have sufficient knowledge in terms of how we can leverage this power. We work closely with the local authorities, trying to understand their policy needs and develop a tailored digital tool for them so that they can collaborate with each other within the council.
What the Digital Cities for Change project is trying to do is to bring together stakeholders from various departments within the city authorities and also external stakeholders that have a role in managing infrastructures so that we can develop comprehensive solution packages that reduces travel demand. By doing that, it will also improve public transport.
Of course, our project is just a very early step of it, but I don't think smart city is a static goal to be achieved. It's progressive. Digital technology can enable the normal people in the city to make smart daily choice without having to know specialized knowledge. I think that is the power that the digital technology will eventually bring to people.
I think the idea of promoting bravery and bravery through building is really compelling. I've always been in love with making space and building things. Girls Garage came out of experiencing a very tangible difference between the way girls behaved as students and learners in a co-ed environment and when I would pull them out as just a group of girls. Had memories of being a young girl and being in those same situations of maybe censoring myself or not stepping up to do the thing I knew I could do. And that's ridiculous, and we should never have to weigh whether being a girl allows us to do something or not. And so Girls Garage was a space and a program I wanted to create just for girls where we could do all of these brave and audacious things that maybe we feel less inclined to do when there's more social pressure. There's the hard, tangible skills that I can point to and say, I've taught 175 girls how to weld, and I think that's great, that girls come in and they don't know how to weld and they leave and they do. I think more than that, it's a question of what you go and do with those skills, and so I want girls to come to us with all of their fears and insecurities and vulnerabilities and questions and leave with some of those things answered. And that these tools are metaphors for so many other tools in the world, and that everything is within reach.
Not everything is science. We have people and we have emotions and we have the social context within which we're having to try and work. So understanding that, very different social contexts, say in South Africa or in India, compared to what we're used to in the West, you need someone to come in and actually force you to think about that more intelligently. I'm researching fires in informal settlements. So informal settlements are communities that are built up very organically and usually made of constructions which are not very robust in terms of their construction materials or kind of the fire safety that we look at. We're looking specifically at how fires develop and spread within those sort of areas. There was a fire in Imazama Yetu where around 2,500 homes were destroyed in a single fire. The amount of damage and lost livelihood is just an immense amount of people being displaced and having to rebuild their lives. Here at Edinburgh, we definitely try and look at the whole range, the whole holistic idea of fire safety. So this is not just looking at the fire chemistry and how fire developed and the dynamics of fire, but also how people interact with fire. So it's understanding their responses, how people can mitigate their own risk, but also what other people can do to help mitigate that risk. So if we can understand what's going on at a fundamental level and a social level, then we can take that and use that information to improve the lives of these people and their safety. So the data that we're gathering, not just from our experimental work, but from our survey work and our interviews with the people of influence within these communities, we're trying to bring this all together to provide essentially risk maps for the city to say, these are the areas which we have identified as being potentially high risk. That will hopefully allow both the communities and the city to have that conversation around those areas about how they might manage to improve the resilience against fire. Statistics show that if you're on the lower economic spectrum, that you're at higher risk of death and injury within fire within the UK and also within South Africa. So there are lots of parallels there. Grenfell, that was a social housing block where there wasn't enough money spent on the maintenance and upkeep of the building. That puts those people's lives at risk. That's essentially what we're trying to understand, both in South Africa and also within the UK, how we can better protect everybody, not just those with the money to spend on the fancy fire safety strategies.
I love to see how everything is built from concrete, steel fixing, excavation, everything. This is what I love. I love to be there, I love to be involved, I love to be dirty and messy. Yeah, I love construction site. I'm a site engineer and I'm responsible for setting out for the top-down area in my construction site. And I just need to make sure, you know, the whole structure is done as it has to be. I went first time in construction engineering when I was first year student at UEL, and I did love it from the first day I was there. A memorable moment was when I could wear an overall and jump into the concrete and pour concrete. That was the best thing ever. I just enjoyed being there, using the poker, you know, while we were pouring the concrete. I just love it. You spend actually 5 concentrated days on a site, and you actually will have an idea how it will be being every day of your life on site. I think it's a really great experience for a student to understand which way you want to take your career, if taking career more in office or more on site. I think engineers and architects, especially the students, they don't have enough practical experience. It is a problem because they are limited when they design. They don't see the difficulty that we have on construction site when we have to actually to build what they design. And then we have to call the designer, bring him on site and show, look, what you designed is really great, but does actually not work. So we have to find a compromise in between the practical side and the theoretical side. You have limits and difficulties. So that's why it is important that a designer has to have practical experience. I hope in the future to see more women in construction site. I would encourage women to come on construction site and show that we are capable to be there and do our job.
I think there's real risks and challenges in the built environment moving forward that possibly industry is not prepared for.
There are statistics that now half of the world's population live in cities. That's going to grow to about 75% by 2050.
If we think about the future of cities, we also need to come to the climate change challenge. Global urbanization is one of the most fundamental forces that informs the extent to which we are either a more polluting planet or a more carbon efficient planet.
We need a more sustainable and resilient place and space for the future. That is the driver for the change that we feel is needed.
I personally believe that for city planning particularly, we need to rethink the role of digital technology in the whole process.
At the moment we have a huge amount of information actually being generated and created in all sorts of different formats within our cities, but we're not able to sort of knit all of that information together to help us make better decisions. If we can do that through appropriate digital tools, then that's a real game changer, because that enables us to engage citizens more proactively in decision-making processes as well.
I would like to see the city planners and the local community representatives have regular meetings about how their areas are developing and how they can better inform one another of what's going on. We're all citizens of the world and we need to be able to manage that better.
We want built environment professionals to learn to work better together because we think this is lacking from traditional education.
If you're a sociologist or if you're an urban planner and you really want to engage with a civil engineer, understanding some of the basic assumptions that are made in that sector, the borders need to be made more fluid and the communications tools need to be established.
We have to be starting to work together with a bigger vision for the town. So as to, in order to create those great living environments, all of us have to be around the table.
Our ambition for the future would be that the placemaking sector in 10 years' time is truly representative of contemporary modern Britain. It's diverse in all senses. We've got sector leaders coming from black and minority ethnic backgrounds. We've been able to support talent development of children and young people from areas experiencing multiple deprivation who otherwise wouldn't have considered careers within the built environment sector.
We've done workshops with grandmas and 8-year-olds. We have classes with a 9-year-old and a 13-year-old, and they're 4 grade levels apart, and they are working together on the same thing. It's so funny that schools everything's divided up by how old you are and what grade you're in, and yet when we work with adults and we work with kids, it all sort of feels the same. And so I love that intergenerational aspect of the work we do.
So I think it's really important that together the sector is creating great quality places and spaces for residents, citizens of our towns and cities to benefit from, to thrive in for the future.